Howdy, everyone. PapaPauper here. I've got my buddy Clay on board. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Doing very well today. Wanted to get together with you. You and I were both talking about this, but to go and take a look at the metagame analysis that we've got from all the games we've been tracking. We have, I believe, 138 games after today's.
Something
Is
like
that
that.
right?
Yep.
138 games that we've been tracking,
Yep.
which comes out to be about one game a day happening in the Tryhards Discord server right now, which is fabulous. So we're starting to
Hot.
gather
Yes.
some super meaningful data on kind of what cPDH looks like in our selection of the format. So let's take a look at what we got here. Um,
Ooh,
oh, this one right here. Yep.
very nice.
Yeah, and real quick shout out to you, man. This website that you're building here is fabulous. I recommend everyone watching this go take a look. We have the deck list database listed up here, as well as the metagame stats, which is what we're looking at right now, and then resources, channels you can go take a look at. We even have a PDH rec that's kind of in
Mhm.
development and things of that nature. So yeah, come check this out. But we're going to take a look at the metagame stats today and talk a little bit about expected competitiveness. And there's a little bit of a story here in that PDH over the last 2 years since you and I have started playing, and not necessarily because of us, but just as more cards have gotten printed, I
Well,
think there's a little bit to be said about
so
yeah.
yeah. First off, shout out to the Tryhards community and all the sons of bitches out there that are putting in the work.
Yeah.
This data happened because of you.
Yeah, look
So,
at all
like,
this beautiful look at all these numbers and bar
yeah, so
charts.
this 138 games is all them. So,
I'm getting hard
thank you.
looking at these pie charts.
Yeah, so yeah, back to our input or impact on the format. Um, so in the I think you and I are responsible for diverting the stream, and
Mhm.
I think once the other salmon saw a different way,
Yeah,
it was all them. Like
yeah.
we just kind of did a thing and then got the hell out of the way.
Yeah, and we could talk a
And
little bit about how that happened. I think both of us were interested in I think I particularly took a strong interest in mid-range and control
mm,
decks, and which is really atypical for me. If you like the way that I play in Pauper and in Legacy and in
mhm,
Modern is really different from the way that I enjoy to play in cPDH. And then you were exploring. We both had a shared interest in Crackling Drake. I think that was kind of the
mhm,
first bonding moment. But we were looking into playing decks that were non-combo decks, and cPDH
mhm,
was pigeonholed a bit in combo. And there were some people who were developing archetypes that preyed on that. I think a good example of
mhm,
that would be Gormod or Ghost and Tormod, as well as what you had just mentioned prior to the recording, which was Armix decks. Anything that could
mhm,
repeatedly devour people's combo pieces, which are creatures in this format,
mhm,
and there were people doing that. So it wasn't that it wasn't happening, but decks like Mayhem Devil just didn't really happen.
mm,
It was a lot of like turbo powered control decks, Tatiova, a lot of Simic stuff, some Azorius, Pure Sight Marrow, Ley Weaver, Lore Weaver,
mm,
that type stuff. And I think you're right that once we started to explore these other things and play in this meta where people were all exploring those things, people
mhm,
thought, wow, okay, these are things that we could actually do ourselves. And I think that there's been a huge proliferation since that time in what is available. And that's
mhm,
evidenced here by winning commanders, number of wins and number of games. So this is only commanders that have put up a win. And look at all the different options you have in this format.
mhm.
And this is just a fraction of it, right? This is just a sneak
Right.
peek. It's like, it's a lot. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can play out there. Now, over time, what you had brought up was, well, let's go take a look at some of these old baddies, some of these decks that were really good, really scary. Um, Class A example, Tatiova.
Yep.
And take a look at how they're doing now that we not only have like a high volume of games played with Tatiova, but also a high volume of games in this sort of new and diversified meta that we have. So take us away with a little bit of Tatiova perspective here and break down this number. We got 29% win rate with, is
Mhm.
that 14 games, 4 wins?
14 games, 4 wins, 29% win rate.
Yep.
Tatiova has an interesting story in our meta because often she's used as a benchmark for determining initial. Now, this was pre-data. Everything was compared to Tatiova. Could it take down Tatiova? Could it
Mhm.
remove Tatiova? Every card quality assessment was centered and focused, maybe unduly,
Yeah.
around
Yeah. It
Tatiova.
really was.
So a lot of these games now, I haven't played Tatty in a while, but probably half of these games were me intentionally bullying our meta
Yeah.
with Tatiova because we went through a phase pre-data where we were trying some really strange ideas, and it's like, hey, how are you faring with combo decks? We were
Mhm.
talking like specifically about like removal, what
Yep.
type of removal is good enough,
Yep.
or we were talking about clock timing, speed, number of
Yeah.
threats, all of that stuff. And it's like, okay, well, if you've met me, I am one of those sorts that's like, okay, battlefield, now let's make it happen, right? So uh, part of that wasn't with determining what Tatiova's capabilities were regarding the data and win percentage at the time. So it just turns out that we were able to record that and get something off of it now. But even then, like 14 games, it's not a million games.
Nope.
Some people would argue that's another caveat to this. Some people would argue that, well, you would need tens of thousands of games to be able to, okay, so let's put a kibosh on that right now. Uh, let's say you had an infinite number of games to
Hmm.
analyze the data with. It would still be meaningless because the player aspect of
Hmm.
playing the game you can't calculate for.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and acknowledge that perfect data doesn't exist and won't ever exist, but some data is better than no data.
Absolutely.
And
We're looking for an
this is
approximation, right?
correct.
And all of these are going to have a delta to them. We're going to talk about this. There's a number of decks on here that perform abnormal to what you and I would expect. And there's going
Mhm,
to be reasons for that. And it doesn't mean that they're really good or really bad. Everything that we have on here is in some way reasonable. Um,
mhm,
but just because that's the sample population of people that we have, is we're really focused on competitive decks. So what people
mhm,
are playing in here, somebody thought this is a reasonable shot at cPDH.
mhm,
And so there's going to be a delta with all this stuff. And yeah, we're not going to make perfect the enemy of good here and just not gather data. This data will improve over time. And it's not really to say what is good or is bad. It's just
mhm,
simply to be able to understand how the meta is shifting.
mhm,
Um, and it's shifted. I mean, I think a really great place for us to start here would be to look at our archetype representation in the meta right here. Um, we have, starting with combo, we have about 30% of the meta is pure combo. You'll see these smaller wedges here are representative of archetypes that are going to have elements of both. I can tell you immediately that aggro combo, listed at 4% of the meta, is one of those good examples. Would be like Garna, Blood Fist of Keld,
mm,
which has a persist first day of class combo in it,
mhm,
only because it's so synergistic with everything else it does. It's like looting, putting unearthed cards into the graveyard. It's giving things haste, but it's also just happens to work with a putrid goblin, which produces 2 bodies to sacrifice to Garna. So it just works. And that is where you
mhm,
wouldn't be able to capture that deck without calling it aggro combo. It's an aggro deck first, of course, but it has that combo element. So if we looked at what combo represented, we'd have here 4%, see 4%, 30%, so 34, another, so 37. I think
about
we said it
40
was like
something.
45, 46% of
Yep.
the meta right now has some element of combo in it. but pure combo decks only 30 is 30% or 29.9. Mid range, we have 22.6% pure mid range decks, and that
Pure.
one pure
Pure mid-range.
pure mid range juice. I love
I did
my
that for you.
I love my mid range decks, so this just makes my heart sing. We have another 5.6% that are combo mid range, some sort of mid range deck with a combo slotted into it. So it looks like what we've got here is about 28% mid range.
Well, even just looking at it, numbers agnostic, right? If you just look at it and get a general sense of the breakdown based on just color, even like squinting your eyes a little bit, it's not equally divided, but it's rationally divided,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there's a sense of there being a healthy meta, like
yeah,
healthy options
yeah.
within. So
That was
that's
what we were really curious about with identifying here. That was like a
is whether
big
or not that
part.
was possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's I think one of
Because
the things.
we were told it wasn't possible.
And I think that's the thing that, wrapping back to how the meta has shifted, is that I think there were a lot of social pressures suggesting that the decks that the archetypes that we wanted to play weren't viable. And I think that what we're finding is that they are. I will readily admit that I am regularly getting crushed by stuff I've never seen before. I've lost 3 times in a row
Ooh,
to a
yeah.
deck that was largely considered to be, like, not cPDH viable, I think, prior, and that was, Carter Doomscourge.
Oh, yeah.
This deck is terrifying. Like, and we'll get into a little bit of the specifics of what decks are preying on the changing meta now. Another great example is Aethersworn Sphinx. I've lost many times to that deck too. And these decks are decks that just weren't really considered to have a lot of viability before. And now we're seeing that in a more representative meta, these decks are killing it. Um,
Mhm.
and when we talk about representative, we have if we just treated Voltron as being like some form of aggro, I would think that this chart here, Voltron 8%, pure Voltron is 8%, and Voltron decks really differ from aggro decks, and that's why we have them separated out here. But like
Yeah.
aggro, being probably like 15 total percent, we have 7 plus 4 is 11, and then I think there was another little wedge over here.
So many
Okay,
little
so maybe
wedges.
more like 12% of the meta is
Mhm.
aggro. And I think that's reflective of the fact that there just aren't a lot of good. Well, maybe it's not because there aren't a lot of good options. It might just be because people haven't explored them yet.
Well, I
But
think,
it's
well,
a little bit
you made a
under.
comment you made a comment about aggro, previously that, suggests that the representation of aggro in this meta is, pretty close to what one would expect to see,
Yeah, yeah. We've talked about this before,
given.
and I've gotten caught with my pants down on this. I was avidly in the camp of, and we've talked about this a lot, aggro doesn't work in a multiplayer game of cPDH because you've got so much more life that you need to take down. And aggro decks are oftentimes reliant on cheaper, efficient threats to whittle people's life down before they can recover. And in a
Mhm,
larger game, inevitably, there's going to be a player who has that time to recover
mhm.
and stabilize. But
So I have an example of that.
that's not true. I mean, we like
Yeah,
aggro is
I have an
performing.
example of that. I have an example of that. It's not a perfect example, but today I played in a, game against Dargo Kedis and Sir Conrad, and then it was
Wow, terrifying.
Rebek and I can never say it.
Iktekik, Iktekik.
Iktekik.
That's the Gruul Golems
Yep.
deck.
So it doesn't even matter what I was playing Satyr Enchanter. Actually, like my first time or second time
Ah,
playing the
yes.
list, but you had Dargo, like just coming down early,
Mhm.
crashing through. Dargo's almost like, turn 2, turn 3.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Kedis is like, turn 3, like right after Dargo. So it's basically, 7 commander damage to you and then like 7 to you other bastards, take that hit. And then you've got compounded on top of that. See, this is where this is where deck analysis gets so tricky. You've got, I think at most he had 4 rats. That's 20. That's 20 damage
Yeah, it's a
on the
lot.
field. So you have a Dargo that's swinging everywhere with trample. You've got rats all over the place, or other large creatures. Like, we're trading back and forth, and in the end, what gets dangerous, like what makes like Conrad is so dangerous, or other effects that do the same thing, because that's another thing we're seeing more of too, is universal damage type of effects, group slug type effects. Once you get down sub 10 life, now you're in range of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think, and that's part of it, is that aggro can work in cPDH because you don't have to do all the damage.
correct.
Other people are doing it too. And sometimes you're at a table where the damage is flying. Like a Cardoor gets down. Like, I played a game where I was playing Witherbloom and there was a Cardoor player. And boy, like, you just like ticking points off. It's like a casino. You just hear the numbers going.
Yeah, you were shook by this card, weren't you?
Yeah, I've been shook by this, and I think it's partially because I had some biases based on my
Mhm,
experience. I'd seen Cardoor played, and it just never did anything relevant. But that was in the context of a meta
mhm,
where there just weren't a lot of creatures. The creatures were important, and you could kind of like dick
mhm.
somebody by playing Cardoor and goading their combo creature that they didn't have the combo set up yet, and then their
Yep.
creature had to swing in. But there were also a lot of creatures that could tap themselves so that they didn't have to attack. So it didn't really generate a lot of value, and it was
Mhm.
largely considered to be a meme. As the meta has become more representative and players are playing a lot more creatures, and there's a reason for
Yep.
that we'll wrap back around to, Cardoor has gotten a lot better.
Mhm.
And this one is built like a Witherbloom deck, where you've got a small number of creature threats, like, for just ungodly amounts of removal, sweepers, like, and edicts. All of the sweepers, all the removal, all the edicts, all the draw, and then all the sweepers. It's just full of control, and then people can't get to you because of the goad. So fabulous
So
deck.
can you tell that Ryan is in love?
I do like this deck. This is a hard control deck the way they have it built. But I should mention that Cardoor can be built as an aggro deck and as a mid range deck.
Mhm.
So
Well,
exciting
as an
archetype.
aggro deck, basically it's just clearing the goad is getting your blockers
Yeah,
out of the way.
you could play
Yeah.
it as a Rat Pack deck easily.
So,
And then red is just a splash, very similar to, for example, Rilsa Rail, which I have
mhm.
built as mostly a black deck with a blue that we find. We can get the blue, like a single blue source, and we're fine. And I imagine that Cardoor could be built the same way, where
Yeah.
Cardoor isn't the main focus of the deck. It's just a thing that we do at a certain point, that works. So as the meta has diversified, a deck like this works really well. And there's
Yeah.
another one that's just like that, and that is Ether
Before
Spore and
you
Sphinx. Yeah, go
before you
ahead.
get all before we hop all into the winning commanders and stuff like that, because
Mhm.
I know it's listed on the left for a reason, because it's the most popular thing. Do me a favor and scroll down just a little bit to expose the two donuts at the bottom, like,
Oh,
so nope.
these two right
Uh,
here.
yeah, so that way they can be
Oh, yeah, yeah.
seen
Sorry, I have to.
right there.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, yeah.
So
There's.
So, talking specifically to archetype representation, and on the other end of that, like win percentage representation within the meta, there's something that we had also previously noticed, is that let's look at just the straight values, not the mixed values, but just the straight representations, like
Okay.
control, mid range, aggro, what have you. Like, aggro in representation is at 6.9.
7%.
Yeah, straight aggro is at 7%. Straight aggro in win percentage is just over 7%. So you're having a
Pretty
almost a
even.
direct correlation to representation versus win percentage.
Yeah, yeah.
The biggest thing that we noticed was that combo at 29 or 30% is underrepresented in the winner's circle, whereas mid range at 22 or 23% is overrepresented in meta representation in the winner's circle. So
It's a
if you're
delta of
looking at
3%.
yeah, if you're looking at those three archetypes, it almost seems like, all right, okay, which one are we going to pick? Well, you'd probably be better off picking if it's in your wheelhouse. That is, I'm not telling people what
More.
to play. Yeah, play more mid range.
I
So
mean, this is actually, it's more than what I just said. It's not a delta of 3%. It's a delta of 3% on combo. So combo, this would actually suggest that mid range is overperforming for its representation of the meta by 5% at the expense of combo and probably at the expense of aggro, which actually makes a lot of sense,
mhm.
right?
and and control to that end, control
Yeah,
is
let's take a look at that.
overperforming well.
Yeah, control is also overperforming by 2%. So, and I would say control is probably also probably prospering over combo a little bit, and then also from aggro. Aggro does not really want to see. I feel like the thing that aggro doesn't want to see is mid range for the most part, because I've lost
Correct.
as a control player to aggro decks in every format, and this is no different. But a mid range deck actually has threats on the table that can like trade with your stuff with the same
And
elements that a
and
control deck
control
has.
elements.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Sweepers, edicts, big draw spells, stuff like that. Engines. So yeah, this has been a fascinating thing, and this ties right back into what we were talking about before.
Yep.
Mid range was not really considered to be viable, and this suggests, from a opening look with 137 ish games, that mid range is actually thriving. That this is a really
Mhm.
and this isn't to say that any one of these archetypes should or shouldn't be played. Um, it, and I think what this is telling us though is that if aggro and mid range are proliferating, pure combo
Ooh.
decks, may need to adapt
Oh,
to
I just
having
thought of
better
something.
presence on the board. Yeah,
So what the viewers now, because someone could be viewing this 6 months from now and it'll
sure.
be somewhat relevant, but a little outdated. Like right now, currently in server, we're having a discussion about the effect of time
Mm.
on
Oh yeah.
on decks. So will mid-range and control suffer with the imposition of a set time limit for matches? Because to be fair, and I've been basically collecting games that are actually publicly viewable. If you search up Tryhards unedited, these are all the games that I play that are uh, usually just uploaded up to YouTube with no editing whatsoever. You get the whole raw experience, and it's there for. I'm not looking to like bust the bank on that channel. What it's there for is another source of data. So looking at it today, because I uploaded a game today. The average game for us is running between an hour and a half and an hour and 45 minutes.
Yep. And that's
So,
coming
uh,
down. That time is coming down. But
so yeah.
yeah, in terms of how that would shift the meta, there's a really healthy discussion going on about this right now. We had somebody pop in and say CDH 75-minute games
Mhm.
as the maximum duration. And I think that that's reasonable in some ways. I think cPDH is just inherently slower. We don't
Mhm.
have as many massive threats that close out the game, and the combos are harder to assemble. So I think that we talked about a 90-minute limit as being
Mhm.
the goal, and I think
Yep.
that we'll have to see. The proliferation of decks. We haven't even seen like Balmor Battle Mage come into the meta yet. Although my good friend Alcathus uh,
Coming
has,
back.
yeah, he brewed we brewed something together, and it's fast. It's going to put a lot of pressure on people. That as we get more of that kind of stuff, the gut decks, which are terrifying, um, as we get more and more of that sort of stuff, I imagine the game timers are coming down. I've even noticed this, compared to my local meta, that in the last 6 months, our games have been significantly shorter. There were memes before about like the dreaded, outlier 5-hour game, 3-hour game, stuff like that.
I've played them. They
Yeah,
suck.
I've played them as well. I would say that I'm a bit of a masochist, and so sometimes these matches that go longer, there's just there's a real pleasure to scrapping for a win when you play a deck that has a lot of outs. But
Well, and
that being said, that's
clear,
crazy. 3 and 5 hours is like I don't want to play that. Like that's not where I'm
to
at.
be clear, like whatever you're doing at your kitchen table, or Tuesday night magic at the LGS, whatever you're doing there, we're not in your living room telling you how to live. You know, we're merely suggesting that in structured, organized play, where you have potentially a good group of players that you need to shift through, maybe setting a time limit would
Yeah,
be preferable. For that's all we're trying to do. And we're not even set, as you can hear in this it's a discussion where
yeah,
we're not an oligarchy. We run these things by the larger group, because we're trying to find this whole project is community consensus, right?
yeah.
It's not controlled. We're the ones presenting it to you. We're the knuckleheads with the birds flying behind us and all that stuff. But like at the end of the day, we're just the lowly servant leaders, the reporters of the data. It's
Yeah,
it's really you guys out there in the field that are like discovering these things and
yeah.
bringing them to us so we can share it. That's it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And no, it makes sense. Part of what's changing the amount of time in these games is also a reduction in the amount of turns in an average game. This has been going
Hmm.
down. I think we're probably going to see this settle out at like 10 or 11 given enough
Hmm.
time turns. Um, and that'll be good. That'll also reduce the length of the games, but yeah, I did want to pop in here and show average turns per game is this a median or a mean? Is
That's a mean.
That's a mean of 11.6. Okay, and a
Hmm.
median of 12. Cool.
A mode
Or
of
a
12.
mode of 12. Okay, cool. Great. Well, we covered some of the big things, some of the big overarching topics that we were hoping to chat about here. But I think there were, you know, some overarching shifts in the meta that I was excited to share about, with the shifting towards creature based aggressive or mid range
Hmm.
decks, and how they adapt to it and the expected performance of certain decks. So I think we
Hmm.
talked about contrasting Tatiova
Yep.
with another deck that's considered quite competitive as well.
Yep. That was Is It Guildmage? So Is It Guildmage has a total of 10 games played, and it has one win for a win percentage of 10. And in the early days, Guildmage was frightening,
Yeah,
quite frankly,
yeah,
because they've got a combo available to them that lets them combo off on turn 4.
yep.
So
And
I
noteworthy to
mean,
say too that if they have if it resolves
yep,
and it is not killed, it can use counter spells to counter your removal and counter spells. So
correct.
if you go lightning bolt, they go counter spell. Somebody else goes counter spell, your counter spell. They just pay mana to copy their initial counter spell and redirect it. And so resolved, it's very resilient. Um,
Hmm.
and that was what made it really scary. Being able to copy certain spells. Pauper is one of those formats or commons in Magic. There are a lot of commons with really busted effects on them. Like
Hmm.
like dramatic reversal is a common. High tide is a
Yep.
common. Like there's some messed up stuff. And you've just got the pure value of like copying a ponder.
Hmm. Oh, so in the vein of Is It Guildmage, there's Lorelei as well.
Yeah, we
So
really do need
Lore
to highlight that.
Lorelei is has 5 games, so not so Lorelei was popular early on, but then fell out of favor because Lorelei Weaver has a haste problem.
Yep.
So you are telegraphing your win, like, "Hey, look at me." And with the amount of removal that's on the table, right, for any given game that should be, right, in any given game, you'd play your combo piece, have to wait a turn, you've got to go through 3 players, and what's the likelihood, right? So, people just kinda just stopped playing
Yeah.
Lorelei. Now, myself and a few other people have kinda looked into, more instant speed, versions. Uh, Essentially, I kinda just got bored with it and I left it alone, but, uh, Lorelei is probably one that you can probably revisit. I don't know how you would add something to Guild Mage because it needs a high spell density.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and this is, I mean, the problem that I mean, Weavers has the benefit of being extraordinarily fast. Is a guild mage can be extraordinarily fast. There's problems inherent to that sort of a hyperdrive speed, which is that people know that it's possible and
mhm,
they'll just hold interaction for you. So there's that challenge. So as we anticipate that the meta in its more diversified state has a lot of threats on the ground that are just like chipping in for damage, which is admittedly a problem that even Crackling Drake has. Um, the way that all of these decks are beginning to adapt to this new meta state is just having more creatures.
mhm.
Um, you and I worked on Crackling Drake. We both have versions of Crackling Drake on the DDB, which are starting to look increasingly similar as we
Mhm.
come to the same conclusions about what needs to be done with a
Yep.
Crackling Drake deck to make it successful. And one of the big ones is big bodies on the field that can block and disincentivize aggro. And a really great example of this would be like Academy Wall, which is a 3 mana blue 0/5 wall with Defender. And it
Mhm.
says every time you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you can loot. You draw a card,
Yep.
discard a card. Cards like that really offer us the ability to like maybe survive and weather the storm of that early part of the game so that we can do our thing. And I
Mhm.
suspect that a deck like Is a Guild Mage, even though it wants to have that high spell count, may have to adapt by playing more of that kind of stuff.
What's the name of that 1 mana cost spell that puts a 0/3 crab and a clue
Oh,
onto the
hard
battlefield?
evidence. Great example. Yep. Investigate, one blue, 0/3 crab. Another one would be like Sailor's Bane, another deck that I would say has a lower expected win percentage. It actually has no wins reported on here. I haven't played it a ton. I haven't reported any of the games that I played with it, unfortunately. Um, but Sailor's Bane has not been as successful in this shifting meta as I would have hoped. Sailor's Bane, by the way, is it's 9 mana, it's 7 colorless and 2 blue for a 7/7 ward 4. That's cost is reduced by 1 for every instant sorcery in graveyard or in exile, or card with adventure that is in exile. Okay, so it never costs more than 2, and the way that it was built, that I built it, was as a turbo Xerox deck, a deck that every card draws a card and puts spells in the graveyard, and you're trying to produce a Sailor's Bane on turn 3, 4, and kill somebody by turn 5. That deck, amazing silver bullet for a Tatiova, Layweaver, Warweaver, because it's just packed with like 20 counter spells and a
Mhm.
bunch of bounce spell removal. It even has edicts with like curfew. It's a great deck for that. If you that deck has the same problem that Is a Guild Mage has, and the same problem that Crackling Drake has, which is just a
Except for
lack of bodies.
Crackling Drake. Crackling Drake has access to red.
It does have actual removal that takes a thing permanently off the board, whereas this blue deck that I'm playing doesn't.
Bounce, bounce, bounce,
Yeah,
bounce.
yeah, yeah. And I think that, but the adaptation is the same. And there's a pattern
Mhm.
here that we can identify: is we need more bodies on the field that produce some sort of recursive value. with Sailor's Bane, it could be with looters, like Merfolk looter type stuff. But I think more where there's just a speed bump. But I think it's the way I'm projecting it is like Academy Wall type stuff. Or Secret Door is another one that's going to allow us to venture into the dungeon a couple of times. Where it's like a big butt, it's cheap, it comes down early, it provides us recursive value. That is one of the big adaptations that we're going to have to see to do that. And so it's no surprise that in these games, Tatiova has a 29% win rate despite the changing meta because it gains life in a way that you have priority for. This is one of the like the challenges with Tatiova when you're playing against it is when it resolves, they get priority to play that land, they will draw that card and they will gain that life.
Whereas you said issues and then switched it to challenges. No, one of the issues with playing against Tatiova is that it gains life.
It's amazing. And we should mention there's another deck that
meta?
Well, I think this is just an example of like how busted cards are as new cards get introduced. And a deck that actually is underperforming, but I suspect will get better, is Ojai Exquisite Blade.
Yeah.
Right, and Ojai Exquisite Blade is 2 white and a blue human monk. It's a 2/3 or is it a 3/3? Something like that. It's a modest body that dies to bolts. Let's just put it that way. It enters the battlefield, scries 2, gain 2. On the second spell you've cast this turn, you flicker something. Exile it, returns back to the battlefield right away. And this deck is underrepresented in the win percentage mainly because there's so many different ways to build Ojai and nobody really knows how to do it. They don't know, is it like every 1 mana cantrip in the format where you're like leap, and like there's some other ones where it's like -0, -4. Oh wait, no, Ojai might be a wizard now that I think about it. I think Ojai is a wizard. Yeah, would you take a look at that?
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to pull it up on my screen here, but regardless, there's a lot of different ways to build Ojai, and it's not exactly certain how, and so it's been underperforming.
Human monk.
Monk. Okay, so I was right on that. Yeah, but it's mostly wizards in the deck. So, but this is another deck that just has the ability to, like Tatiova, just it's a terrifying combo with the ability to like buffer its life total. And not to mention, you can play stuff like Jeering Homunculus, which is the 1 in a blue for a 0/4 that goads a creature, or Stonehorn Dignitary that turns off combat for a player for a 1/4 for 4, or even like Aether Snipe type effects, where you can like cast it with Evoke, cast another spell, get 2 things bounced, flicker it, comes into play as a 4/4. These decks have the tools to inherently buffer their life total while progressing towards their combo and not dying. So that's the kind of stuff that I think is really good. In lieu of that, if you don't have that in the command zone, you really do need to start thinking about playing cards like Academy Wall that are going to allow you to survive as people beat you down.
There's a minor discussion going on. It's only minor regarding commander-centric versus non-commander-centric combos. And I'm firmly in the camp that your commander must support your game plan either as a combo piece or just as a general support. Like, I'm trying to think of so I mean, Conrad would be perfect. Conrad is nowhere near the aggro game plan, but Conrad capitalizes on the back end, the graveyard of the combo or of the aggro plan. So the initial plan is to bust out a bunch of rats, let them all die because rats don't care, and then
specifically the Rat Pack version of it, right? Is like the commander is a thing you can do. And it works with the game plan, but it's not the whole game plan. You can just win with rats. Another deck
it's also a 5/5, so
it's also just a black 5. It's 4 toughness black creature with 5 power. That is the threshold. For those of you that don't know, I have a bit of a formula on this. If it has 4 toughness, it doesn't die to bolts. If it's black, it doesn't die to half the black removal. It's just pretty
Fly
gross.
forward. Yep.
And people don't really want to point their like witness protection at your big Gurmag angler. No, they want that for your
Mhm.
commander because it's a pain in the ass. But yeah, Mayhem Devil is another example of that. We have a big proliferation in decks doing that kind of thing. Where it's like, yeah, we have everything in the deck works with Mayhem Devil, but we're not trying to play Mayhem Devil on like turn 3, or turn 4. We're playing it probably on like turn 7, 8, 9, maybe a couple
Mhm.
of times because it will get
Capitalizing
removed.
on the board state because you
Yep.
need the board state.
And then the rest of the deck is just Rakdos good stuff. Good draw, good removal, sweepers, edicts, big creatures that come back and evade. Another deck that's similar, that has a build of it that's similar, Sidrax's Spectre can be built that way. Just Grixis good stuff. With just a good Grixis evasive commander that kind of like messes people up when it hits them. Sidrax's
Mhm.
Spectre is red, blue, black, 3/2 flying. Every time it deals combat damage to a player, they discard a card. It has Unearth for 1 and a black. So you
Mhm.
get 2 uses out of it. You take cards out of people's hand. It's a sick deck.
And if you flicker it, you never have to
Yes.
pay
If you
commander
unearth
tax.
and flicker it, it comes back as the real creature, which is pretty cool. So there's some sweet stuff there. But yeah, so shifting meta, interesting to see how
Mhm.
these different archetypes are performing
Yep.
based on what we might anticipate, what's happened in the past, and what's coming,
So,
and some
but
new
before
adaptations to it.
you pipot, the last thing we should cover in the shifting meta, because it's an oldie but a goodie, and I think we pointed out last time that it's actually taking advantage of the shift away from blue, and
Hmm.
that's our dear friend Zada at the bottom.
Oh yeah, boy. Yeah, this is a great example actually of a deck that. Well, we have a
Well,
bit of
it
we have a Zada problem, which is that I'm hearing a lot of reports of people pointing their counter spells at things that aren't Zada in Zada games. Tapping out of counterspell magic when Zada is in the game is a very ill-fated decision,
Mhm.
and you will die because of it. So
And
people
Zada
maybe
was held at bay. Yeah,
by
Zada was held at
counterspells.
bay by counterspells
Yeah,
in the early
yeah.
days of the meta. So
Early
as
Zada was awful. It's-
yeah,
I don't think I
so
lost a single time to Zada, despite looking at
until
the deck and being like, "This is so disgusting." Like I've seen Zada players draw their entire deck. The current build of Zada, built by Stein and myself,
Mhm.
focuses on adapting to the way that the meta is with a lot of ramp, basically in the form of like creature mana dorks. But Zada is a great example of a deck that wasn't considered to be terribly competitive because you sat down at a table with like a Ley Weaver, Lore
for
Weaver, and a Pure Sight Marrow,
40 counter spells, and
uh,
you had to
and like
negotiate your way through
Gormod.
it.
Yeah, and it's like it's
Mhm.
not happening. Okay, like you are not going to find many opportunities to resolve Zada and do your thing. But look, Zada in a meta like this, where it's starting to become more representative, you play Zada into a pod with no blue player, that is disturbing. Zada is
Mhm.
really scary because removal is not how you beat Zada. All the instant speed draw effects are going to draw them cards on the stack. A smart Zada player will resolve Zada and they'll cast their sorcery speed draw spell first.
You'd have to gang up on them. So you'd
Yeah.
have to have at least 2 or 3 removal spells and outprice them.
But even then, like, think about it this way. They resolve Zada. I go kick in the door, which, for those of you that don't know, grants all creatures you control haste and +1/+1 counter on everything. And then it ventures you into the dungeon. If you have 10 creatures in play, you venture 10 times. So you venture 10 times. It's one of the most powerful new cards that we got recently. It's really fun. I've gone through the Mad Mage 3 times on one cast in one instance. A Dungeon of the Mad Mage 3 times. I scryed like 15 times and then free cast 3 cards. So you go kick in the door and they go Doomblade and you go Accelerate and they go Lightning Bolt. You're still drawing all those cards. Like removal only means that the Zada won't be attacking when you go to
Mhm.
combat. It's not a way to beat it. And so yeah, Zada has like gotten a lot better in a more representative meta. It's a great deck because there's just less blue players, and we've got a lot of proliferation of other stuff. So yeah, great example, Clay, to point out of like how that meta has shifted and what's working and what isn't. So yeah, um, pretty darn cool stuff. We've even got some wild ones like Liara Portier here.
Mm-hmm.
Puzzle Box, I think, is the champion of
Yep.
that deck. I think the sole player of that deck right now. Liara Portier, is that
So
6 or
8 games.
five five
It's a 5. It's a 5 drop.
5
So
mana
8
3
games, 3
5?
wins. Yeah, 38% win percentage.
It's like every player that
It's
you attack in combat, you exile X cards off the top of your library, where X is the number of
right.
players you attacked. And then those cards get reduced on their cost by X, where X is the number of creatures or players you attacked. So you
Yep.
flip those cards off the top. And basically, the way Puzzle has it built is with a lot of mana rocks. So you
Yep.
flip 2 to 3
But
mana rocks
a
off the
lot of
top.
mana rocks. A lot of mana rocks that these days do more than just
Yeah.
produce mana.
Bonder's Ornament, Commander Sphere, Network Terminal, Honored Heirloom, Unstable Obelisk is probably in there. Just a lot of really high value stuff. So it's a cool mid range deck. And
It's a
then we've
freight
got
train.
it is a freight train. It gets going. Gut Feywild, Gut anything is
Ugh.
just Gut Feywild is so scary, dude. It's so like
Mhm.
you've got a player like making like 3 fairy dragons every turn, and it turns out because they're dragons, they don't die to breath weapon.
That's a meme now, isn't it?
It is a meme. It is. And they could even, there's actually some tech from Zada that I discovered that gut decks could be playing as well. And I hate that I'm giving this information out right now because it's so frustrating when this happens. But Volatile Claws, all creatures you control, it's 2 in a red instant. All creatures you control get +2/+0 and gain all creature types. And what that does is it means that Breath Weapon and Fiery Cannonade don't hit pirates or dragons. It's a way to basically bork some of the sweepers that are common in the meta. And so I suspect this is a deck that will continue to put up a lot of results. Gut Agent of the Iron Throne sounds terrifying. Just like Rakdos aggro. 4/1 skeletons going all over the place.
4/1 skeletons suck.
Yeah.
No. 4/1 skeletons with menace
Yeah.
suck.
You could easily see a turn sequence where somebody's like, I bet gut decks even play Lotus Petal too, because it's just like a thing you can sacrifice to gut, and it deals damage to everyone on its own. So it's like dealing damage to everyone on its own with Agent of the Iron Throne, which is 1 in a black every time a creature or artifact you control goes to the graveyard, I believe. Everybody loses 1 life, and it's a partner. It's a background. So, yeah.
Ooh, this reminds me because we were talking about overperformers and underperformers, and then earlier we made mention to data and what it means. You will notice on this list of wins that there will be decks that have 100% win percentages.
Passageways here.
Use with caution.
Yeah.
Notice that we're not talking about like after that 5th game is about when we start looking at it because we want to make sure that it's not much of a fluke. I mean, yes,
Yeah. Crackling Drake, Cardur, Breaches Malcolm. What a deck. That's another. Breaches Malcolm is another great example of how the meta has shifted too, right? Like being basically a mid-range combo deck.
because it replaced
Kedis.
Kedis.
Kedis Malcolm was the explosive combo deck that kind of suffered pretty hard from the Rhystic Study Mystic Remora bans.
And the increase in removal.
And the increase in removal, the increase in edicts. It just didn't have a lot of creatures. It has some, but there's just not a high plurality of them.
There were the combo pieces, so.
Yep. So yeah, lots of shifting there. Yeah, yeah. It's just amazing to see. So like, yeah, the ones that we're looking at would be like Armix Dargo, Abdel Sword Coast Sailor, Cardur, of course.
Which to be clear, anything Abdel is not
I mean, Abdel
the,
is a
yeah.
terrifying commander, and the
So
reason that three of these have two of these have less than 25% win rates is
right.
probably because the commander is too powerful.
It's
The
known that
the
you have to,
Tatiova.
well, yeah, it's known that the deck, performs once it gets going, and your challenge when you see an Abdel at the table is to figure out that nexus point of when they have the pieces and they don't have the pieces. Now, the problem with that, and which is the Tatiova problem, is even without that massive stuff to for their engine, right, without all the pieces of their engine to go infinite, they're still able to produce tremendous value, even with just a couple of pieces,
Yeah,
you
I
know
think like Abdel actually does something that Tatiova does really well too, which is that everything is redundant. Like in Tatiova, every land you have is an additional card and additional life. In
they play
Abdel,
38.
every
Yeah.
rock is like another soldier or another card draw, or like if they've got experimental synthesizer or your like an enter the leave kind of a thing, like a prophetic prism. That stuff all just gets really gross. I lost to this Abdel Urchin deck with 21 soldiers on the board. It was so scary. That deck is a Noyark special right there. Abdel Street
Mhm.
Urchin. Street Urchin's like one in a red or two in a red. And then it says pay one, sacrifice, or commander creatures you control have pay a colorless, sacrifice an artifact or a creature you control, deal one damage to any target.
Mhm.
So it's like a mayhem devil machine gun in the command zone, which is terrifying. But like, yeah, all of these Abdel decks actually they're doing in that same vein. Aethersworn Sphinx is actually another good example of that.
Oh,
Everything
yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yeah.
redundant. Everything is just like doing what the deck wants. Like every Aethersworn Sphinx is 9 mana. It's 7 white and a blue, 4/4 flying with Cascade and Affinity. So it just like
A
never costs
and
more than
not
2 mana.
thought and not thought to be possible or,
Yeah,
eligible to be a competitive deck when it
and
was
this
first
is
looked
a
at.
dark horse. This is a Aethersworn Sphinx. I've played games against Aethersworn Sphinx recently where they are soloing the whole table and winning. Um, like every spell and every creature attacking and going towards the Aethersworn Sphinx, and them still comboing with Dramatic Reversal. Uh, Noyark has made a monster here. This is
Mhm.
a has a Dramatic Reversal combo. It also has a Peregrine Drake Ghostly Flicker combo, and everything that it cascades into is great. It's like if it's a mana rock, it reduces the cost for the next cast. If it's a creature, then it's like something that provides ETB value or a combo creature. The deck has like a bunch of like hexproof 4/5 turtle creatures in it that are just like really hard to kill. Um, it's a great deck, but another one similar to Urchin, where it's like there's no bad draws. There's no bad draws in this whole deck. Like terrifying. So yeah, as you can see, meta has shifted. A lot of really cool stuff. This is a fabulous time to be playing cPDH. Um,
Still a brewer's paradise.
it really is, and we haven't even really scratched the surface. There's so much more, so much more. And by the time we have, it'll be next year, and they'll make another commander set, and we'll have more backgrounds
Even
or
more
more
extent, yeah.
partners. It's like, oh my god, it's so cool. So, well, I think we've covered most of what we had imagined chatting about today. Was there anything else that you had on your mind, Clay?
Ah, I just wanna say it again, as I'm looking at all these beautiful colors. Oh, before I get to, paying the sponsors, as it were, we never talked about, player number of wins by win percentage up on the top right.
Let's take a quick gander at that.
It's right there. It's
Oh
right
wait,
there on the right.
oh yeah, yeah. Player by win. Yeah. So you've touched on this before in some of your videos. Um,
I have. So originally, when I started looking at the data, in fact, this was probably the first anomaly in the data that I actually saw. I started putting in I
And
started
what
putting in all the data for the spreadsheet, and then I started doing averages, and then all of a sudden I noticed that seat 4 at that time had a 4% win rate. Now it's increased
20,
slightly.
21.7 by a lot. It's more what I think players would come to expect.
Or
I think
seat 3,
most,
right?
oh yeah, C3 specifically, yeah. So
Yes.
so C3 had an abysmal win rate, and we should go through kind of what we're seeing on the screen here. Seat 1 has a 32.6% win rate. Seat
Yep.
2, 28.3. Seat 3, 17.7. So there is and then actually between seat 3 and seat 4, that's 21% for C4. So
Yep.
actually, there's about a 4% delta between each seat if you were to skip seat 3. So if you went seat 1 to seat 2, it's 4%. Seat 2 to seat
Yep.
4 is another. It's actually
6.
6%. But seat 3 is at 10% delta from seat 2 at 17.4%.
Yep.
And that is a persistent anomaly that we've talked about a little bit before.
So now you can go to player seat analysis, that tab.
Yeah, this one here. And we can kind of look at.
So what I
Um,
started doing is I put in a function to basically look at the types, because I my initial thing is I blamed it on archetypes, because our meta in the beginning was really unfriendly to combo, and my thought process was that C3 was just being dominated by the just having all the combo players
mhm,
sit in
mhm.
C3. So that's somewhat the case, but it doesn't fully explain everything. So
We do have some
so
patterns that are clear to me here, though.
mhm,
Um, for example, an aggro deck really doesn't want to be outside of seat 1 and 2. And a control deck doesn't need to be out the gates hot, but I don't think it wants to be seat 3,
mhm,
seat 4. And what we do have is we actually have quite a bit of aggro and
in the first 2
control
seats.
in the first. Well, aggro and control is in seat 3. And
Mhm.
this may be accounting for why this is a
Oh, yeah, yeah,
losing
yeah.
seat, right? The fact that it's lower than seat 4, I think, has something to do with the fact that by the time seat 4 comes around, there's a lot of stuff that's already happened, and like a like there's certain
Well, some
archetypes
people,
that don't care about C3, C4. Like mid range just doesn't
right.
care. But if you're
Well,
combo in C4,
some people were speculating that by the time, seat 1 and seat 2 go to combo off, seat 3 is the first one to respond, and you know how that goes. If you're using up all your resources first, by the
yeah,
time it comes around for you to take care of business, you have less protection for your own game plan. So there's there's many ways that you can cut this cake, and we're trying to figure out why. So also, like, if you have ideas, by all means, this data is available for you to steal.
all for public
It's
consumption.
all public consumption. If you see something we don't, leave a message in the comments. We're checking this stuff regularly, so you know please educate me,
Yeah.
please.
Well, and I
So
think that not only come and check out the data, but come be a part of it. Like we said before, like this meta that we have in the Tryhards in particular, which we're really trying to proliferate the number of players playing this. Clay, recently you've talked about a vision for bringing cPDH to your LGS.
yep.
Those things, you, dear viewer, can become a part of that. You can be
Mm.
on this list of numbers. If there's a deck that you think that is really good that you want to put to the test, come bring it, and it'll just get added in
Mhm.
here. We've got people tracking data in the
Mhm.
server, and you can start to influence what we have here. It's a great time to be playing the format. There's a lot of really
Mhm.
exciting developments happening with the way that WotC is printing cards
Yep.
right now. Fire Design has just pushed commons into the stratosphere with crazy
Yep.
downshifts like Monastery Swiftspear, which didn't really matter that much for cPDH, but like that sets a bit of a barometer for like what you can expect. Monastery Swiftspear is okay as a common.
Hmm.
Like this is a
Even
great
if you
time to
can't,
be getting into the format.
we would absolutely love to have you, but even if you can't join digitally,
Yeah,
if you are playing at your LGS, the whole sole purpose of this website is to be a starter package for
yeah.
you going into your LGS. It's resources, it's sample deck lists, it's metagame data, so you know what's going on in the metagame. There's a resources tab, so it has gameplay from everyone who is making cPDH content right now is going to be listed on that resources tab. There's other big plans in the future that also will help you with, maybe building your first deck if you haven't done that yet, or sort of thing. We're constantly improving this site specifically for the purpose of you taking it to your LGS, playing with your friends, exploring this format. I promise you, it is so much better than regular Commander. So much better. And for the price of your average Commander deck, you can have 2 or 3 Pauper
Oh,
Commander
oh,
decks.
easy. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna flex a little bit here. This bag has 3 battle boxes in it
Whoop.
of cPDH decks, and all of that is significantly less than a CDH deck on its own. So you can play competitive Magic with your friends in a multiplayer format for a fraction of the price. Average cPDH deck comes out to be about $75. Add
Mhm,
Snowlands into it, it's a little bit more. But even then, like my favorite deck right now, Rilsa Rail, it
mhm.
clocks in at like $38. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
Torwalkie with Snowlands is 63,
that's under the
so
average with Snowlands. It's just like great competitive Magic, highly interactive. The Tryhards is a great community to come play, right on the cutting edge where it's just so much open territory to explore, and all at a budget. So really do encourage
mhm.
everybody to come and give it a whirl. So I think with that, Clay, we're going to wrap things up and give you a thank you for joining us on our little exploration of the metadata today and of listening to us schmucks chat and schmooze about the format. And
The next time, yeah, yeah, we'll be
yeah,
back.
yeah,
We'll definitely be back.
oh yeah, expect it, expect it. And yeah, we'll catch you all on the flip. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Peace.